Warhammer The Horus Heresy, Eidolon The Auric Hammer, Chapter 2, The Veil Rends. Sirens flared through the madness of the bridge, high and shrill, long since augmented to seize the attention of a crew ruined by madness and overindulgence. Eidolon was already in motion, surging up from his throne, bellowing orders at cringing slaves and unprepared warriors alike. "Up, you mongrels," he spat. "To your stations. Give me clarity or I will have your skins." Surf spun and danced out of his way as he hurled himself towards the wailing consoles. Malacris was quicker, hand up and flashing, eyes alight with mirth. He brought a shining gauntlet round, smashing it into the side of a slave's skull. No sooner had the unfortunate fallen than he was upon him. Torturer's blades, plucked from his belt, glimmered in the faltering light as he began to cut and stab, prying free skin in long strips. Blood joined the paint upon his armor, and he leant forward, licking the screaming man's life from the blade with savage glee. Witchlight burned in the high vaults of the ceiling, illuminating gaudy murals that leered down with two real eyes. The ship breathed, the walls pressing in, bowing outwards with some strange internal force. Malacris looked up, fascinated, enraptured by the yearning things that waited beyond. Vociferon held. He stood ramrod straight, hand upon his blade, waiting for the storm to break around him. Till Plegua followed in Eidolon's wake, his sonic weaponry humming, building to an inevitable crescendo. Shutters rose with a sudden clatter, rattling back up and into their housing, exposing the roiling madness of the warp. The Immaterium clawed at the ship with spiteful longing. The struggling Gallowfield rippled and fluctuated as hungry faces stretched across its skin of tenuous reality. The Vox crackled to life, filling the already cacophonous space with fresh screaming. The Navigator's link was alive with pain, broadcasting the man's agony into the open air. Malacris cooed as he heard it, head snapping back like a dog scenting meat, addicted to the spice of suffering. Eidolon turned from the addled lunatic and fixed his gaze upon Vociferon. "See to the Navigator. We will break from the warp and see what can be salvaged from the wretched bastard." He spat upon the decking. "I want to know where we are. We need to restore communications with the rest of the fleet. We stand upon the brink of the greatest battle, and I refuse to be seen as a laggard." Vociferon nodded and turned away, pushing through the crew and out of sight. The Lord Commander Primus watched him leave, and then turned back to the crew. He had scooped up Gloria Eterna and hefted the hammer in a sweeping gesture, pointing it at the tormented void beyond. "I want us out of this miasma. The sooner the better. If I am not indulged presently, then I shall begin breaking bones." A chord of accents rose from the slave pits and station alcoves that surrounded him. Eidolon stalked between them, Till and Malacris at his heels, peering down at the desperate and the mutilated. The frisson of panic that had saturated the bridge was laced with the stink of human excretion as they toiled beneath their master's gaze. Every now and then, Eidolon would lower the hammer's unpowered edge to the nape of a slave's neck, watching them tense. Sweat ran freely down their scarred skin, tongues lapping at lips with fretful longing, torn between the desire for death and the hope of yet more wretched life. They both yearned for the attention of the legionaries and hungered for the culmination of the warrior's wrath. "Most noble lord," one of the slaves mewed, "we are sense-blind and warp-locked. We cannot break from the Immaterium. We have tried, yet we seem suspended in the storm. It holds us on both sides of the veil, caught in the claws of the gods." "I do not want excuses," Eidolon hissed. "I want "To be free." The voice breathed into his ear, rippling with laughter. Eidolon spun, weapon up and ignited in a heartbeat. His face twisted into a snarl as he confronted nothing. Malacris looked at him askance, leering at the Lord Commander Primus as he scented weakness. "You seem skittish, Eidolon," he purred. "Hardly becoming of a Lord Commander." "If you think you can do better, Captain, then I invite you to try. It would lift my spirits to watch you flail vaingloriously at the open air, expecting that others will follow your commands." Eidolon sneered and brought the hammer up to Malacris's shoulder.
Remember your place, whelp.
How could I forget? Malachus whispered, leaning nearer to the weapon's embrace. His flesh drew dangerously close to the active power field. The static discharge snapped like lightning between the armored plate of the warrior and the glimmering weapon, earthing through Malachus's bones and making the studs and rings embedded into his flesh sing. Is it only the Phoenician, I wonder, who can knock you from your pedestal? Your speculation bores me, Malachus. I suggest you find yourself another hobby, Eidolon said, his slack mouth stirring into a smirk as he leant closer. I am not so easily replaced. You, though? I could carve 100 bastards from the flesh of the third, and any of them would be your match. Before the other warrior could reply, the hydraulic hiss of an opening door drew both of their attentions. Vociferan strode back into the chamber, features set hard. One arm swept out to shield a hunched figure in tattered robes. Gold chains, broken now, hung limply from the figure's wrists and ankles, trailing behind them as they staggered onto the bridge. The Blade Master stopped and nudged the man forward. The hood of the robe slipped back, and Eidolon beheld the rune that had become of Navigator Primary Toshan Malar. He had clawed at his face, nails digging so deeply into the flesh that bloody furrows were carved down his cheeks. His mortal eyes were gone, gouged out with his own fingers, but it was the horror of his forehead that captivated Eidolon's gaze. The Navigator had removed his bindings and torn the warp eye from his skull. The Lord Commander Primus let his gaze move down the bloodied robes to the hands that Toshan held out, trembling, to the gory detritus smeared there, still aglow with some inner light. It was a powerful thing for a Navigator to pluck out his gift. It stings, Toshan whispered. He raised his empty sockets as though still capable of seeing, fixing them impossibly on Eidolon. A kingly voice calls and sings, the sea beyond keens back in kind, and we all tumble down into the abyss with them. Better darkness than that. I have made my choice. I have been chosen.
Restrain him,
Eidolon said, and stepped forward.
Why must we always be stymied by the folly of lesser men?
No one answered. He shook his head and hefted Gloria Eterna high. He had never liked navigators, not truly. There were few who had actively courted their presence, and fewer still of their breed who were worthy of attention. The stunted nobility, cultivated out of necessity, each of the houses was a scheming nest of mutation. Its scions humanity long since sieved away and transmuted by the rigours of some past dark age. Tools at best, he thought as he looked upon Toshan's mutilation. Broken ones now. It sees you. Toshan burbled suddenly, raising one hand to point a quaking finger at Eidolon. It knows you. There is no succour here. Only the inevitable end. Only... The hammer fell. The crackling head of the weapon atomized Toshan's skull. The man's body tumbled back, trailing his golden chains and a dusting of burnt blood. His hands flailed at the empty air. The dull remnants of his warp eye sputtered upon the decking. Vociferan flinched backwards, shocked by his master's sudden wrath, as Eidolon stalked forward, glaring down at the corpse.
This is the price of weakness. Do you hear me? Each of you owes me service, fealty, and I expect you to deliver. Any who falter shall die, by my hand, long before you reach the hands of our enemies.
He whirled about, face contorted with rage. Veins twitched in his throat, the flesh rippling with the barely contained scream already building there.
Break us from this cage, or I will shatter every one of you in turn.
He turned and left the bridge, leaving only mewling slaves and useless servants in his wake. Still, now eternally at his ear, came the mockery. That was very cool. I like Eidolon as a character here. He's very different to how I thought he would be. I love the Emperor's children. Even in the Horus Heresy, they're all kind of vying for, like, position and trying to knock each other down and put themselves up. I suppose this legion is nothing but warring egos at this point, with the exception of a few people like Vociferan, who know their business. It's very cool. I'm loving the exploration of the ship and its crew. I wonder what's going to happen next. Because without a navigator, how are they supposed to navigate the warp? Oh dear. Do they? I wonder if they have a spare navigator. Would you have a spare navigator? I don't think they would they? It's not normal for a ship to have more than one, I don't think. I suppose they've landed themselves in quite a pickle. Or, well, the warp has decided that they're going to have a bit of a pickle. I wonder where they're going to end up. If they're going to end up anywhere. Is this whole book going to be set in a warp storm? Because that would be pretty interesting. I don't really know much about what happens in a warp storm other than, you know, bad things from the warp happen, I guess. I suppose we'll see. Remember, if you want to see more, please do like and share and subscribe and leave a comment and let me know what you think. If there's anything I can do better, I will do my best to do it in the next video. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Bye.